Dr. Steve Williams. He recently retired from my old department, Ecosystem Science and Management. He's a soil microbiologist, and talk about some other activity that Brett got him involved with here at SAREC.
Thanks, John. I came to the University of Wyoming 40 years ago, and I met a pathologist out of your department, Bob Bergstrom, and he said, "So you're a microbiologist?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, that's a very small biologist, you know." And I said, "Well, actually, I'm a soil microbiologist." So I've always given it away. He said, "Well, that's a very dirty small biologist." But anyhow, I've been a soil microbiologist for at least those 40 years or so. I'm going to talk today briefly about some activities of the Rogers Research Site. This is a forestry-related site, something kind of new for the state of Wyoming. And what I'm going to talk about, at least initially, something about forests in Wyoming, forestry in Wyoming, and then the Rogers Research Site. Part of the reason I'm doing this is because I think, to some degree, we've kind of ignored forestry research in this state, when actually forests make up a pretty large percentage of our land use in the state. If you look at the designated political boundaries of forestry, you know, Forest Service manages quite a bit of land that's forested. Some of it is Alpine land. They still manage it in national forests. National Park Service manages a pretty big chunk of land, as well as the Bureau of Land Management, the state, trust lands, and private lands. You know, we've got 16 to 17 million acres of forest in this state. That's roughly 25% of the state. Now, admittedly, there's not much of this commercial forest, but it's still a very important forest to us for a number of reasons. One is certainly there are the alpine lands that are embedded in these forest lands, and those are great water-producing environments. Now, there's certainly these variable soils, which makes it quite challenging to manage forests across the state. But they're very important areas for wildlife, a diversity of wildlife. We saw some of the last wildlife in some of the last talk. This is an owl that I photographed at the Rogers Research Site here a couple of years ago. But in terms of forestry-related activities at the University of Wyoming, certainly we have an educational minor in forestry at the university currently. It's kind of having some difficulty in terms of instructorship. We have some research going on, particularly wildlife and water research in forests. Recreation is very important. Commercial forestry is not big. Over the Black Hills, it really is. There's some substantial commercial forestry ongoing over there. And of course, fire ecology, which I'll get into in a moment. Outreach, defensible space has become a very big item in the state. And best management practices, which I've been involved in for Forest Service with state forestry, with private landowners in terms of controlling erosion on forested sites. And of course, water. Water may be the biggest and most important product from our forests. But I'd like mostly to talk about the Rogers Research Site. This is a piece of land that was willed to us by Colonel William Rogers probably more than a decade ago now. 320 acres. It's up here in the Laramie Range, about 8 miles from Laramie Peak or so. Vegetation is mostly ponderosa pine, some aspen. I think I've seen a lodgepole pine up there, but there's not much lodgepole pine. It's located, as I said, near Laramie Peak. It's surrounded by medicine bow forest on 3 sides. It's on granite and similar metamorphic materials. So what that means is the soils there are very infertile. And growing a tree there is a long-term proposition because of the low fertility. So the planning for the use of the Rogers Research Site really got kicked off by Brett Hess and his vision a few years back. He put together a team that I worked on, and we identified a number of areas that we wanted to explore in terms of research at the Rogers Research Site. However, in July of 2012, the Arapaho Fire came through and burned 99.5% of the Rogers Research Site. So immediately this became the fire research site. And so our focus now is on post-fire restoration of the site. The one building, and the most important building, on Rogers Research Site that did not burn was the outhouse. And And there are actually a few live trees around the outhouse too. So that becomes our, oftentimes our focus of where we start our activities when we're up there. There are a number of focus. One foci is the establishment of ponderosa pine, and that's what we're working on for the most part. There's a big issue with weeds. This is, whoops. This is pointer actually work or not? Well, this is Bromus tectorum. You've already heard a good deal about cheatgrass, and that's moving in. We also have a tremendous amount of thistle that's moving into the area. You know, I'm really interested in nutrient cycling on the site because it is such a poor nutrient site, but there are a lot of nitrogen-fixing plants there, and that's something that if I continue to work up there, I'll do some work in that arena. But anyhow, there's several restoration questions that we're trying to address. One is using an erosion control seed mix to control erosion post-fire. And so that's one of the questions that we're trying to address. A second question, and, you know, this is our seed mix methodology. We had this ATV from the State Forestry Division that we were using for distributing seed. It doesn't work up there very well. So we wound up distributing the seed by hand, and that worked pretty darn well, you know. You get the right people with the long legs moving across this country, and they can put down a lot of seed in a short period of time. Our second question was, do cutting treatments influence restoration post-fire? And we had 3 cutting treatments, one where we removed all the sawwood and wood and slash from plots, another where we removed only the sawwood, we left the slash, and we've got these uncut controls. So that's a second question that we are addressing. It's taken quite a bit of work to clear the burned timber out of these plots. This is just a picture of a tree going down. But ultimately what we're after in our cleared plots is something that looks like this, where we've got certainly some stumps left, but we have no slash, we have no cut sawwood left. And then we have other plots where we've left the slash. The slash contains actually quite a few nutrients. Now, those nutrients are only slowly available over a long period of time, but still it contains the nutrients. Our third question was how do planting treatments influence restoration? So we're doing a lot of replanting with tubling trees, 1-year-old trees. We're replanting with seed, and we're allowing natural regeneration to occur also. So we have plots that address all of these things. The seed source we're using is from near the Colorado-Wyoming border. We are encouraged by a lot of people who live in the Laramie Range to use local seed, but there's not much local seed available after the Arapaho Fire. So we got something further south. Our 1-year-old seedlings were produced by Colorado State Forestry Nursery. They did a great job of producing the seedlings for us. So anyhow, this is a plot where we are putting out the seedlings. Each of the flags here represents a site for a seedling, a tubling, if you will. This shows the trees that we were planting, and our planting methodology is pretty straightforward. But in total, our experimental design, this is something that Brian Mueller developed, and I don't know whether to thank him or curse him for it, but we've got 2 treatments, grass and fork control, 3 treatments of the cutting, 2 cutting and the control, 3 treatments of planting and natural regeneration, and then 4 replication and 4 blocks. In other words, a 2 by 3 by 3 by 4, 72 experimental units, and these units are almost an acre in size. And so it was a big job to get these things cleared and planted. This shows just a representation of the plots and the treatments that we had in these plots. This, which you cannot see very well, but I've got a map of it if you want to look at it later on, shows the Rogers research site from an aerial perspective. And what we have here is 320 acres that lies roughly in the middle, sort of Z shape in the middle of a square mile. Each of these areas is a block of treatments throughout the Rogers research site. So our treatments occupy quite a bit of this area, but there's lots and lots of room for other things we want to look at if we can. Tolerance of maybe 5-needle pine to blister rust, There's lots of work that we like to do with the pine bark beetle in this area, looking at trees that have been bred for tolerance to the pine bark beetle and whatnot. A lot of other things. So anyhow, in terms of where we are right now, I think the last seed will go in next week. We've been refencing the area to control domestic animal access. We want to start monitoring trees and establish them annually in the future. But as I said, there's plenty of room for other studies. This shows our signage for whatever that's worth. This is obviously an uncut plot that's been planted. You can see flags out there planted with tubulings. This effort has gone on, I've been involved with it for about 8 or 9 years, and it's been a huge team effort from UW, from the state, from others. And all of these people have been involved in this. And I'd like to point out particularly State Forestry, Josh Van Vleck and Travis Pardue that have helped us considerably. But there have been lots of people here that have been involved in this, and lots of people that have been really fantastic. Really, maybe one of the most amazing people we've had is our cutter, the guy who's done the cutting of the plots. This is his skidder that was actually stuck in this picture. We spent more time this spring digging skidders and trucks and that sort of thing out of mud than we did planting trees for quite a while. Jim O'Brien was the caretaker of the place for many, many years, and I think we've got to thank him also for the work that he has done in taking care of the place. But Jim Freeburn has been really quite amazing in terms of the work that he has done, and especially on the fencing and whatnot. And then my graduate student, Claire Wilkin, which really set up all the plots. You know, Brian determined the experimental design, but she was the one that went on the ground and actually put the corners in. Stan Belgard, this is something else I haven't talked about. We've done a pathogen survey up there. He came in from New Zealand and helped with the pathogen survey. But probably the main person that I would like to thank here is Molly Herget. Without her, and she started this spring, I don't think we would have finished this project. She's been very dedicated. She's up there right now. She's been camping there for 3 days with another couple crew members finishing up this project.